Life Between Lives Therapy Case Study 2 on Resilience and Acceptance. This case study illustrates overtly spiritual core issues and the expectations people can bring to intentional life between life sessions and to life itself. The client is Ajay. He's a male, 34 years old. He's a salesman who's married. He's an Indian living in Bangalore. The presenting issue is that Ajay felt he had an overwhelming karmic debt to his family that was overwhelming and unpayable, like an interest-only loan. He felt torn by a spiritual yearning to renounce the family path, and finally he mentioned the relatively recent death of his young son Rajesh. All of this had taken a toll on his health. Ajay's ultimate goal was to know how to do my karmic duty, to clear my karmic debts, and achieve release from the karmic cycle. He felt his desire to be a renunciant was a danger to his family that depended on him. He saw a contradiction between his personal and professional life and the spiritual life. As a background, Ajay had attended a hypnotherapy training class run by a former client and student of mine, and he'd come based on her recommendation. But first he bought his 66-year-old father Dheeraj for 5 sessions to deal with his severe nightmares. Ajay had waited for his father to complete his sessions, partly as a way of putting his father first and partly to see if it works. All this despite having studied hypnotherapy himself and me having come with high recommendations. Ajay's father Dheeraj himself had little interest in hypnotherapy, but Ajay witnessed over our 5 sessions that his father Dheeraj went from being a skeptic with nightmares to sleeping well and being a strong advocate for hypnotherapy for every presenting issue you could think of. Ajay set out some goals for the session. He wanted to use hypnotherapy in his subconscious in many areas. He wanted to first look at his health, as he had early stages of cataracts in his eyes. Secondly, he wanted to work on his finances. He felt burdened as the sole breadwinner for an extended family. Third, in his career, he felt an unhappiness with his job. Buried beneath these 3 priorities was fourthly grief. His 3-year-old son Rajesh had died in an accident 7 months ago. Some background and history. Ajay had a serious, staid manner. His hair had started graying in his early teens. He was now developing cataracts prematurely for his age. Since the age of 7, he'd wore glasses due to myopia, short-sightedness. At 7, he also had a bout of panic attacks related to the bipolar disorder that was emerging in his mother. She remained unwell, but his attacks slowly disappeared. Ajay's only child Rajesh had died recently, and his wife was now a few months pregnant. This redoubled his desire to understand karmic relationships, the purpose of life, and his spirituality. Dheeraj, Ajay's elderly father, had started off saying he was only here because of his son and called hypnosis nonsense. At the end of our session, he called hypnotherapy a boon to uncover my psychology and past lives. He went from being too unenthusiastic to being too enthusiastic. Like his father, Ajay had gone from very skeptical to overselling. He now wanted to apply past life regression therapy and life between lives to physical health issues. And he wanted to speak with his dead son to confirm his hope that his soul would return again as his second and as yet unborn child. In the interview, Ajay stated clear goals. As a professional businessman used to writing plans, he set out a business plan of 7 steps. He said, 1. I want to understand the reason I've chosen health issues and weak eyesight in this life. If it was not a pre-birth choice, I want to understand the reason it has occurred prematurely in me. He said that he had read case studies where once people realize they made a pre-birth choice, they may be able to make a new choice and be freed of the condition to help restore his eyes to full health. Secondly, he said, I want to know the role of my son in my life. Why did he die? Is this to help my soul growth? Is it to repay a karmic debt of mine? Had I done something wrong and required punishment? Will he return to us as our child again in this life? Thirdly, he wanted to understand the important karmic relationships I have in my life with my mother, father, brother, son, in-laws, brother-in-law, cousins, friends, and any others, and to know what is the right way to perform my duty to clear up my karmic relationships with all of them. Fourthly, he wanted to overcome hindrances in his professional life like excessive submission to authority, fear of being creative or innovative, fear of public speaking, and even fear of just speaking openly. Fifth, he wanted to overcome his financial insecurity. He said, I'm constantly afraid for my job since I carry a huge loan on my house and I'm the only sole earning member. Sixthly, he said, I want to understand the purpose of this life and where I should focus my energies. Seventh, I want to reconfirm my spiritual efforts and know how to perform better in this area. My progress in meditation and detachment is not up to my expectations. So this was a long and fairly overwhelming list. So Ajay's presenting issue had been a feeling of an overwhelming karmic debt. He is now presented with us an overwhelming set of outcomes. This is typical of his issue. So we can observe this tendency of overload that he has with himself and how he's trying to impose that on this process too. Therefore, we need to interject so that we don't allow him to overwhelm this process too much. We can do that with the pre-talk. Some of Ajay's issues do not relate directly to the subconscious mind. I point out that his father Dheeraj's issues of nightmares relates directly to the subconscious. Therefore, it is appropriate for hypnotherapy. Dheeraj has said to my face he thinks hypnosis is nonsense, and I would agree with him if we apply it to a realm outside the subconscious mind. Now it's my turn to see if the objectives make sense. I point out he first brought a misplaced skepticism to the sessions, and now I have to manage your excess enthusiasm and overwhelming goals. Ajay's previous reading had led him to set expectations for these sessions that I had to address. I said to him, I don't propose we do life between lives therapy to contact spirits. I don't assume life between lives or past lives are the cause of your issues, and I do not assume that they can resolve physical issues. We don't assume, but we can gather information. We don't dictate the solution. We ask for wisdom. We can just let your subconscious mind decide what is appropriate for you now. It will give you what you need when you need, whether you think you know what that is or not. That's all the expectation I'm prepared to give. Is that okay with you? He agreed. So he set an intention to recall a moment in this life, then a past life, then life between lives. So with that intention set, we went into a hypnotic state. I asked Ajay to go to the garden and the temple. Instead, he said he found himself on a hillside cliff with an orange-gold evening sky. Then he saw his son Rajesh soaring over the cliff with a cheeky, naughty grin on his face. Ajay wondered out loud if he was imagining it. It was surprising to find him like this. Why would he be flying around over a cliff? As he tried to process this with the part of his conscious mind that can still participate in the session, his emotions started to well him up. He now took it seriously and asked his many questions. Son, is this to repay a karmic debt? Is this a punishment? Rajesh continued to soar over the cliff playfully. Ajay found this emotionally reassuring, but to each question Rajesh ignored. He just smiled quizzically, even teasingly. Ajay still sensed a reassurance from his son that he and everything was all right and as it should be. He continued to ask questions, but the spirit of his son's response to any more detailed questions was to simply give a blissful smile, and then he dissolved away. Ajay called him to come back, but Rajesh didn't come back. Ajay felt a little unsatisfied that Rajesh didn't take him or his questions seriously. We continued the session. I hope to get back to my plan of recalling a time in this life to get a resource. Now, Ajay reported he was walking in the business district of a prosperous western city. He was feeling a spacious peacefulness, and he observed this is a future life. He described walking the busy streets, yet feeling a detached calm amidst the morning rush. He stopped to smell the coffee and drank, contentedly watching life move around him. I observed that his deceased son Rajesh had not given Ajay the answers to the questions he had asked, and his mind was not following my session plan. This was Ajay's superconscious way of training Ajay and myself out of having rigid expectations about what we'd like to do and being flexible to accept what does come up. Nevertheless, we were able to now access a past life. Ajay described, I'm 20, I'm in a jungle, I'm part of a hunting party, I have a kind of headdress. Now Ajay started to analyze and doubt what he's seeing. He said, well, I sense it's a tribe in Central America, but that can't be right. These look like tribal people. I must have got this from the people in Northeast India. This doesn't reconcile. I'm just making an error. I'm making it up. I instructed Ajay to return to his awareness, not his analysis, to play forward and let himself see what happens next. He says, okay, these tribes people, we're a party, we're walking in the jungle. A jaguar's made a fresh kill. I can zoom into that scene. I can see the hunter that I am. I see the jaguar. And in my mind as that hunter, I imagine I can catch it. The jaguar wants to run. I chase it, and it's forced to defend itself as it's backed into a corner. It claws my face. One of my eyes is punctured. It's destroyed. The other eye is damaged. It goes opaque. I have very little eyesight left. I have him play it forward to any other life highlights, to the end of this life and the death process. I couldn't continue as a hunter. I had to stay with the woman in the village. I couldn't do my duty for the tribe. I didn't marry, but over time my frustration turns to acceptance. I sense later in that life my near blindness causes another injury that leads to an infection, an illness, and a death in my mid-30s. I wasn't happy or successful in any positive way in that life, but I managed not to be overwhelmed by my negative emotions. After leaving that body, Ajay recalls the relief at floating over the village and out over the jungle, where he met his spirit guide for a life review. He says, my guide says my sole test was to accept the situation, my injury and my dependence on others. They say I succeeded in that life. They say part of your life purpose in this life is to accept having others be dependent on you. I realize now my eye can flare up if I'm becoming unaccepting of a situation. My eye condition can remind me not to lose sight of my purpose. I ask if we can meet the soul council. The spirit guide avoids or fudges the request, so I understand the answer is not now, or not in a way we might expect. But we do get a kind of communication when the spirit guide says to Ajay, they say, you need to drop expectation. You've spent energy envisaging an illusory reality, then comparing it negatively to actual reality. When external reality doesn't match up, it drains away all your hope and resilience. Your purpose is to learn and demonstrate resilience this time, which is linked to acceptance. This is the inner process I've been running to feel overwhelmed or create suffering for myself or others. I realize now the path of freedom involves dropping expectation. That first session comes to a conclusion. The theme of dropping expectation had run through every aspect of the session, including the setup for the process of LBL that we both had as a client and therapist. Ajay's responses did not meet my directions. He mainly ignored my questions. Instead, he gave answers to other questions. This gave me the chance to accept my acceptance of whatever came up from my client. I didn't make him wrong or insist he follow my session plan. Ajay recalled his expectation that his eye condition was the result of a life between life's choice, or a bad thing. He now said it was neither good nor bad, but a helpful indicator to warn him when he needed to take action, and to remind him what kind of action to take. Ajay said, it's like the pain of putting your hand on a stove. It's not good or bad. We just need to get the message and take the right action. The stresses in this life had led him again to feelings of frustration towards his responsibilities. He felt recalling a past life where he successfully got past frustration and learned acceptance was like accessing an inspiring resource. I point out there were some parallels but distinctions between the lives. Before he had to accept being dependent. Now he had to accept having many depending on him. Before he had lost his ability to contribute to society at the age of 20 and died in his mid-30s. In this life, he graduated at 20 with the skills to contribute, and now he was in his mid-30s in decent health, able to contribute to society in a society with a much longer life expectancy. He came to have more gratitude for his present life circumstances. A week later, Ajay came back for his second session. As part of the preparation before hypnosis, Ajay mentioned that during the week he had actually researched Central American tribesmen. I'd forgotten about his initial doubt and his analysis that the tribesmen that he saw in his hypnosis were wrong because they didn't fit his expectation. Ajay was shocked to discover historical pictures of Ecuadorian hunters who wore the exact same headdress he saw. He found this to be a great proof. Personally, I'm less impressed by these factual proofs and am more interested in the therapeutic outcome. And while this had validated the process of hypnosis and regression for him, it also seemed to reaffirm some of his expectations, which may not have been completely appropriate or were a bit excessive. For this session, Ajay wanted to focus as his priority on his karmic relationships with his son and all his family members. He reminded me, we set this as a high priority in our first session, but we didn't cover much of it, so let's make sure we do it this time. And what about this life between lives? Despite what we'd achieved so far, there were still elements of uninformed or frustrated expectations. In the second session, we did some hypnosis and a regression to this life, a moment in this life that is causative to the core issues. Ajay recalled being 7 years old at an expensive boarding school. He missed home. But when he got home, he felt harshness from his mother that he didn't understand was due to her new mental health issues, not his own failings. Next, Ajay recalled 7 years ago, being 27 years old, at work, working hard, trying to repay his parents' investment in his education and all that his parents had done for him, feeling faced with a huge task, like a massive rock weighing him down, and him there feeling alone and that no one can help. We progressed to past lives. Ajay recalled a life as a 7-year-old boy, a Brahmin in northern India, studying at an ashram far from his parents in the Gurukul system. This is an intensive system of learning based around the guru, a strong charismatic teacher. He was getting a good spiritual education, but he was extremely sad and missing his mother. His 7-year-old self in that life said, "I'm trying to run away, but I only make it as far as the edge of a ridge. I'm there now, sitting on the rock face, thinking of dying. I'm overwhelmed by the sense of missing my parents. I feel like I can't handle it. My mind goes fuzzy. I play recklessly by the ridge. I fall down the rocks. I go unconscious. But part of me can see my body is broken. I see them. They find me. I died. It looks like an accident, but it was close to suicide." Ajay floats above that body and meets his spirit guide. Before they go into the light, they stay to see what happened next in the earth plane. He says, "I see my funeral and my mother. I see how much suffering I caused her. Oh, she's my mother in this life too." Ajay goes into the light. He recalls the pre-life meeting with his soul group, including his mother from that life. "My soul group is showing me the life plan. If I'd continued that life, I would have graduated and met my mother again. I would have been a well-educated Brahmin young man. I would have made her proud and happy." I ask if we can meet the soul council. This time Ajay perceives he is before a group of senior souls. He says, "They say my soul lesson or challenge in that life is resilience, to counter getting overwhelmed and giving up. I volunteered to face and try to overcome these issues again as Ajay." The events of this life seem to highly correlate. In the past life, his mother suffered due to his early death. In this life, he suffered due to his mother's mental illness. In the past life, he was a child who died hurting his parents. In this life, he was an adult hurt by the loss of his child who died. He realizes, part of me wanted to create the tough life as Ajay, as a self-punishment for the suffering. My near suicide killed my mother. The council say a wiser part of me worked with my soul group to become Ajay as an opportunity to quickly make good for my past shortcomings. This required the agreement and help of a senior member of my soul group to agree to a short life as my son. That soul doesn't reincarnate very often now, and they don't need to come back again as my son. We know from other cases that it's possible the soul of a baby that died can return as a baby again to that same parent, but it's unusual. It usually doesn't happen like that, and it's not the case here. In fact, it's much more common they are senior souls like this. Ajay's soul continued to speak from the life between lives just after when he had died as a 7-year-old. He said, "The soul councils say that an overwhelming desire to quickly redress past failings can create overwhelming present life circumstances. They can only guide me in the life selection and challenges I ask for in life between lives. They say this moment is an opportunity for me to hear again and understand the spiritual story about a man who wants to work really hard to clear his karma. If I work really hard, how long will it take?" The masters say to him, "It will take 5 lifetimes." The man says, "What if I work twice as hard? How long will it take then?" The masters say, "Well, then it will take 10 lifetimes. I realize now I've suffered enough. I don't need to invite extra punishment. I realize the faster I try to go, the slower I get there. I realize I have an opportunity to practice resilience, and I can do that by managing my expectations and not overwhelming myself. I say, can you ask them about your view of personal life versus spiritual life? They help me realize there's no contradiction. All aspects of my family and professional life are part of my spiritual path. I was overwhelming myself. I can take responsibility for that. Now I know the faster I go, the slower I get there. I can make positive changes in not just what I do, but in my way of being while I do it. As that second session came to a conclusion, Ajay was more peaceful. He was less over-analyzing and undermining of his inner knowledge. He said, my irrational sense of an unpayable debt is so much less. I can see I have already paid debts, and I have the chance to pay more. If I take it slowly, I'll surely get there, with acceptance and resilience. Ajay now saw burdens he thought were obstacles to his spiritual path were actually fundamental and requested aids to his spiritual progress. The third session, therapy. Ajay said, well, this so far answers enough of my questions about my karmic causes and debts, but I still felt Ajay had a desire for more contact with Raj. We booked another session to use hypnotherapy to address his issues at work, as well as to apply some follow-up therapy to our Life Between Lives session. We did this hypnotherapy to work with his professional life, and we came to his personal life towards the end of a session. I had Ajay go back to a resort. That second he stopped crying. He looked me directly in the eye. He gave me his cheeky, naughty grin, just like when he was flying above the cliff. His face was tear-stained, just like my face had been as I sat on the cliff and cried about my parents. In this present life, when he was 2, Raj just looked at me in the eyes. He pointed at the tears on his own face, and he said, Papa, now you can wipe away these tears. He recalled the wisdom that had incarnated in his son and spoke to him in that present moment.